Sometimes the most terrifying thing that we can face in our lives isn't something that's trying to hurt us. It's something that's trying to love us. Let me back up a second. So I just finished playing El Paso Elsewhere, and it just... Hold on, let me check the amount of time that's gone by here. Are we a minute in yet? We are? Okay, cool. So I just finished playing El Paso Elsewhere, and it just fucked me up. This is the latest release from developer Strange Scaffold, whose previous releases have been nothing but eclectic and interesting. So following in that trend, El Paso Elsewhere is a third-person action game that takes direct inspiration from Max Payne, complete with slow-motion bullet time, ballets of death, and noir voiceover narration running constantly in the background. Having only played Max Payne once, back on the PlayStation 2, I walked into this a little blind as to what to expect. Sure, I get the gist of it. A man with a dark past and a trench coat, carrying 2 pistols and enough painkillers to run a hospital for a week, diving between cover in hallucinogenic fits of slow-motion ballistics. And, for the most part, that does in fact cover the general gameplay experience. But what gives it a unique twist is the setting and the story. We play as folklorist James Savage, who is 6 months sober off a heavy drug addiction and trying real hard to run away from the memory of an abusive relationship he left behind 2 years ago. Problem is, his ex-girlfriend is a vampire named Dracula, and she's currently invoking a ritual in El Paso, Texas that could potentially end the world. James recognizes what's going on, and being a glutton for punishment, decides to fall off the wagon on the way down to El Paso where he plans to confront Dracula. But these kinds of things are never as easy as point A to point B. Because you see, entering the seedy motel in El Paso where the ritual is taking place, James is enveloped within the ritual as reality warps all around him, shaping and reshaping the environment into a stage play that takes place literally across thousands of years. Ancient Egypt, the Great Depression, and more modern events, such as important landmarks in James and Dracula's history. James understands that this is a cosmic power known as the Void, attempting to keep him at bay. So armed with his trusty pistols and pills, James descends into the Void via the motel elevator in order to find Dracula and put an end to all of this. That is a hell of a setup, and a hefty one at that. But Strange Scaffold, under the direction of project leader Xavier Nelson Jr., steps up to the plate with the kind of confidence and desperation that I haven't seen since Quake. Confidence in that they know exactly what they are doing and how to make the game they are aiming for with every single step. And desperation in that, oh god, we need to find a way to finish this. We need to make this a reality. Somehow, oh god, we have to make this real. And they absolutely nail the delivery. It's no secret that Strange Scaffold came this close to shutting down during the development of El Paso Elsewhere. There's an incredible interview with Xavier Nelson Jr. over on IGN about this topic, which I'm not going to regurgitate here, but I will link below. That push, that sensation of the need, the desire, the desperation to create is evident in everything here, filled with raw, unhinged passion that is almost too intimate to bear. The way the game unfolds is brilliant. Instead of a series of large interconnected levels to travel through, searching for clues and battling monsters, El Paso Elsewhere is broken up into 50 mini levels, most of which follow the same formula. Step out of the elevator, shoot a bunch of monsters, find and rescue or kill a number of innocent victims being used as sacrifices in the ritual, then return to the elevator and continue downward. I was immediately reminded of Hotline Miami within the first 2 stages. Get in, get out, fuck some shit up along the way. A thundering soundtrack overhead keeps the adrenaline spiking, guns blasting louder than cannon fire and faster than street racers. Segmenting the missions in this manner keeps the game tight, densely packed, and full of vivacious action. As mentioned before, this is heavily inspired by Max Payne, which the game happily revels in showing off. James has a health bar, which can be topped up via extensive and probably unhealthy use of painkillers, and a bullet time bar, which can be refilled by killing the monsters in each mission. Slow-mo is so fucking cool to use that I almost felt bad using it at times. You press the V key and the world slows down into a beautiful cascade of violence as your weapons blast in deep, percussive booms, shells, and cartridges bouncing off the ground like discarded children's toys. Controls are super smooth and easy to use whether in slow-mo or regular tempo. James can roll, dive, and even dive directly into slow motion for those extra cinematic John Woo moments, which was pretty much how I used slow-mo exclusively for like 75% of the game because, well, it just looks really fucking cool. The jump is pretty neat as well, something that I found myself not using very often, mostly to surmount certain obstacles in my way, but in the rare platforming sequences, I found that the jump, combined with the precise air controls, made for a super effective combo. So, that being said, controls are all tight to a professional degree. Making a misstep in El Paso Elsewhere never feels like a problem with the control scheme, but that you, the player, freaked out and hit the wrong key instead of keeping your cool. Bullet time is the aspect of gameplay that El Paso Elsewhere hangs its hat off of, and if it didn't work right, or if it felt cheesy or silly, then the whole experience would no doubt fall off the rails. Slow motion is really hard to get right in PC games, I think. Honestly, in most games that I've played, it just comes off as, honestly, kind of silly. It usually feels to me less like dramatic cinematic moments in movies like The Matrix or the films of John Woo, and more like kids pretending to be in slow motion.
Dory. What are you doing? What are you doing? Are you sure you speak well?
Can you?
Dory?
Don't get me wrong, I do love the idea of bullet time in PC games, it's just that 95% of the time, I'm genuinely not feeling it. If I'm going to shoot things in slow motion, I want to see and feel every single hit as though it were punching me right back. And thankfully, El Paso Elsewhere's bullet time is gleefully, monstrously fun to use. Now, from a practical standpoint, bullet time as a mechanic in this game is essential to use. Weapons become twice as accurate in slow-mo, meaning you can land headshots John Wick style and take out enemies from afar without having to worry about them getting in close and murking you. Because James, God love him, is human after all, and desperately in need of those painkillers in order to stay the fuck alive. To call bullet time essential to the experience is a bit of an understatement. You're going to want to hit that V key, drop as many monsters as you can before they notice you, and come back to full speed so you don't accidentally waste too much of your meter, and you're going to want to do so often. Getting cornered is something that can and will happen at any time if you're not paying strict attention to the arenas. And considering that monsters will try to constantly ambush you from around corners, there's a palpable sense of tension riding high at all times. Combat in real time is faster and more furious and haphazard than you want it to be, and that's on purpose. If you somehow run out of bullet time to spend and are forced to spray and pray at high speed, you'll feel like you're flailing about, desperate to gain control of imbalanced situations, praying that each monster filled with lead will be enough to get your bullet time meter high enough for you to go full Neo on the bastards and get the upper hand again. So, while you might be able to one-shot pretty much every standard enemy up close with a shotgun like they're made of wet paper, if you get surrounded and you don't have bullet time, you're going to be frantically dodging and rolling in a heated string of swears until you find your footing again. See, that's what I enjoyed most about the gameplay. Even though it can sometimes seem like you're waltzing steadily and surely through each stage without popping a sweat, the truth is that even when you're feeling fully in control of the stage, it can all descend into chaos at the drop of a hat. Part of this balancing act has to do with the speed of James's actions. Sure, bullet time is something you have on your side, but weapons sometimes need reloading, and pills sometimes need swallowing. Hitting the reload key, or the health key, results in James slowing down for a moment to perform said action, meaning you have to make sure that you have a decent amount of distance between you and whatever else is in the room before you do so. Popping pills is an action that can't be interrupted, but reloading can. So if you hit the reload key, and then hit roll to get out of the way of an incoming attack, you're gonna have to start reloading all over again. Pro tip, every single chance you get, scroll through your weaponry and reload. Just constantly be reloading. Your arsenal, on paper, is a little straightforward, but it all works as well as you need it to. Dual pistols, a Tommy gun, an Uzi, a grenade launcher for when shit really hits the fan, and Molotov cocktails infused with a little bit of holy water. Holy shit, fuck me, that is genius. But it's the shotgun that steals the show for me. This thing is loud, proud, and hits like a cement truck driven by God. You're also carrying wooden stakes, but only a limited number at any given time. This is because wooden stakes will fucking one-hit everything in the game except for bosses, but those bosses have health bars that you need to whittle down so that you can stake them. Most bosses have 2 bars, sometimes 3, and that dance of ballistics and driving a stake in at the right moment is super satisfying. Part of the fun and also the challenge of the combat in El Paso Elsewhere comes in juggling which weapons to use in slow motion. I loved diving into bullet time while holding the shotgun, letting off a thunderous blast, and then swapping to either the pistols or the Tommy gun mid-dive. You could still turn the camera at a normal pace while in slow motion, so scrolling from weapon to weapon and taking aim in that headspace is not only a great strat, but it feels and looks so fucking cool. Now, when it comes to the monsters we have to fight, El Paso Elsewhere's chessboard is simple but nefarious. We've got straightforward vampires, which run at James for melee swipes. We've got leaping werewolves, which can cross more distance than you think that they can. Cursed brides who can teleport around the stages to throw balls of dark energy your way. Undead knights whose armor has specific weak points. Biblically accurate angels that shoot rockets at you. That's a thing. And one of my favorite recurring enemies, the Puppeteer. This asshole is a figure from James's past that nearly got the best of him once upon a time, but now has been summoned by the void as an obstacle. The Puppeteer crafts floating, dancing puppets to buzz around your face like unwanted insects, and the longer he hangs around, the more of them he creates. You have to chase down the Puppeteer as he runs away from James's advance, which creates an interesting twofold problem. Stop the Puppeteer, or the puppets that are getting in your way. Every appearance that this enemy made, my anxiety would spike and I would frantically hunt him down, ignoring everything else in the room, because I knew those goddamn puppets would overwhelm me if I didn't take him out. One of my personal favorite enemies in any game in recent memory. I am, at the end of the day, a big fan of the way missions are laid out. They're short, simple, usually have a gimmick or two that ties directly into the narrative. They layer monsters in strategically so you're constantly on your toes, and with 50 chapters in total, you're going to have a lot of monster killing fun to go through. That being said, even though I ended up enjoying it as much as I did, this is definitely a game to be played in chunks and not marathoned. From start to finish, El Paso Elsewhere took me about 8 hours to complete. A lot of that has to do with cutscenes, most of that has to do with combat and sometimes finding myself in dire situations that I had to run again and again in order to muscle my way through. Some of it had to do with some light secret hunting, and some of that had to do with getting lost. Despite the relatively smaller size of the missions, there were a few times where I found myself turned around and not 100% sure where I needed to go next. I feel like the pathfinding isn't bad, necessarily, but I do think that more than a few of the chapters had paths that were a little more open and not as telegraphed as I'd like them to be. But these instances were few and far between, so even though I got a little lost here and there, it never felt like something that I was running into constantly. Due to the density of each of the chapters and the volume of the game as a whole, playing through the game in lengthy sittings is going to feel like a lot. Like heavy weight lifting a lot. When you're lifting heavy weights, you want to go for fewer reps across multiple sets. So, too, is the way to go here. I would run 4 or 5 chapters in a row and feel exhausted. Exhausted in a good way, because the game is thrilling and ingeniously spaced and paced, but fucking exhausted nonetheless. Gamers looking to binge through a game really want to think twice about that here. Part of me, in sitting down to write this script, wondered if maybe the game itself is too long, or that maybe the combat is too repetitive, but I really don't think that that is the case here. Sure, you're essentially fighting the same series of monsters over and over and over again in a different series of arenas, but each mission is so cleverly designed to assist in the overall storytelling that I never felt like combat was repetitive. Nor does it feel like the 50 chapters outstay their welcome. If anything, I still wanted more of this game by the very end, even though concluding the final confrontation felt like letting out a breath that I had been holding since the opening narration. El Paso Elsewhere, simply put, is one of the most densely plotted and executed games I have played in a long fucking time. The story on display is one of heartbreak, of addiction, and trauma. The last time I felt this affected by a relationship in a video game was Silent Hill 2. Watching this story unfold, listening to James's narration, understanding the plight that he had been through and was willing to confront once more, absolutely broke me in half. Xavier Nelson Jr. has been upfront about how the story draws from real-life experiences. It is intimate, it is raw, it is vulnerable in a way that feels like you really shouldn't be interacting with something this naked and fraught, yet you can't turn away from it. We've all been in relationships to one extent or another that resemble the story of James and Dracula. At one point, Dracula meets with James briefly and tells him, "I'm sorry for what you feel I did to you." It's that particular phrasing, that very extra special form of gaslighting that can only be recalled and written from real life experience. Even if you haven't experienced relationship trauma, this is a story that will draw you in with the quality of writing and the cinematic presentation. Almost every chapter has a cutscene following it. Most of them are short, some of them are longer. All of them are essential. The pulp noir voiceover is especially triumphant here. I wanted to write this video in a pulp narration to try and pay homage to this game's caliber of writing, but that shit is really fucking difficult to nail, so all I can do here is take a step back and applaud. I applaud this game for not only nailing the Marlowe-esque dialogue and the raw realism of relationships gone rancid, but for simply being incredibly, indelibly written and presented in a manner that should be recognized come awards season. Hands down, this is the best written game I have played in some time, and what's even more impressive is how effortless it feels in doing so. This is in the little details, in James's increasingly fatigued inner dialogue, in his deteriorating clothing ripped and torn and bloodied, in a simple stack of chairs throughout various levels, and in the game's hammering, yowling mantra of determination every single time James falls in combat. You keep going. That's a rough one right there. You keep going. Most games would be content to slap a "you died" or "game over" or "get good" on the screen, almost mocking your feeble attempts to conquer their craftsmanship, but El Paso Elsewhere grabs you by the collar, lifts you to your feet, and screams in your face, "You keep going," before slapping you on the back and returning you to the fray. So when I say that there is a desperation about the game, about the driving force behind it, I don't mean that in a negative way. Sometimes, when you're in a fit of passion, of drive, and there's a struggle involved with whatever endeavor you have going on, there becomes, by default, a sort of desperation to achieve, to overcome, to surmount. I've already mentioned that the developers nearly went under during the creation of El Paso Elsewhere, and their struggle, their desperation to see this project through is palpable in the narrative, but most especially in the soundtrack. El Paso Elsewhere hit me hard in ways I didn't expect to be hit. In the heart, the head, and in the gut. But bringing it all together as the final cherry on top, the chef's kiss of the Olive Garden, is this original soundtrack. Composer R.J. Lake delivers an OST that fires on all cylinders at all times. Thundering, cacophonous, louder than God even when it turns down the volume to the quietest notes. This doesn't just mirror James Savage's quest to see his way through, it cheerleads the player by providing the biggest, baddest, most badass tunes a vampire killer could possibly ask for. We have driving rock music, heavy bass techno, trip-hop and piano tunes reminiscent of Akira Yamaoka's work in Silent Hill, and quiet, contemplative strings. A soundtrack this all over the place shouldn't work as well as it does. The variety should make everything feel too dissonant, but it comes together, even at turns in whimsical ways, providing the uplift that we, and James, need to continue to push forward and keep fucking going. But it isn't just R.J. Lake's compositions that power the audio component of the game, it's also the game's original hip-hop soundtrack. This is credited to Lake Savage, which is the combined talents of R.J. Lake and Xavier Nelson Jr. Nelson raps over incredibly massive beats, lyrics working in tandem with the themes of the story and James's situation as he pumps round after round into the monsters blocking his way. My personal favorite track is Blood Pressure, which had me so fucking amped while I was playing that I forgot to use the bullet time. I was so high on adrenaline, tuned into the beat, and firing in sync with Nelson's flow, shotgun in hand, just a complete juggernaut.
Woman screams in God, I'm feeling great. Blast twice, make the crowd disintegrate. People run, yeah, they try in the hiding shops. I'm a hunt with a gift from the lockbox. Cop escape cause the shit be on its way. I keep moving, I could run like this every day. Bodies fall cause I'm calling every shot of the numbers with a gift from the lockbox. Get your numbers up, boy, get your numbers up. Lay those bodies down, boy, get your numbers up. Get your numbers up, boy.
These hip-hop tracks are all slotted into the exact right stages. Just when I thought a chapter was going to kick my ass, one of these tracks came on, and it challenged me. It lifted me up. It made me shake off my malaise and decided that I was going to keep going, and so I fucking did. It's hard to really describe the perfect balance and dichotomy that this game reaches for, achieving with an exposed nerve that hums with each shell racked into Savage's shotgun. Every pill swallowed is one that feels like it's going to push us over the edge while being necessary for survival. Every chapter is enough to break a lesser human, but the game doesn't just let us stop, drop, and die. No, we're told over and over, you keep going. James Savage is going to save the world, and it might be a one-way trip, but god damn it, we're not going to let that stop us. Not even the memories of an abusive love, of how a person can put up with so much pain and trauma, all in the name of one good day that made them feel perfect, like they could make their partner feel glad to be alive. Life is singing throughout this game, echoing over and over, you keep going, all while reminding us how much it fucking hurts. There are two endings to this game. The ending that I got was the one that I think most people will get on their first time through, and it is pretty fucking bleak. Nowhere does the game promise a happy ending. I mean, James himself says over and over that this is a one-way trip, but man, oh man, was I not expecting the gut punch of a conclusion that I got. The second ending requires some dubious actions and is slightly more upbeat, ending perfectly on the theme that the game establishes in the beginning, of belief, and that believing hard enough can move even mountains. But no matter which ending you get, as the credits roll, I guarantee you'll sit back and wonder at how a game can hurt so much to experience. And if you don't, then you don't have any feelings. Or maybe you do and you're just kind of numb. Fuck, that came off as insensitive. Are you okay? Are you kids doing okay? Is everybody all right? Are you doing okay? Of course, no game is perfect, and El Paso Elsewhere does have its faults here and there. There are a few bugs that crept up on me during my playthrough, including a couple that blocked progression, which forced me to restart a couple chapters over. One bug affected the final boss fight, where I couldn't see Dracula's health bar, and the game refused to let me use my shotgun. I must have done something to anger the game, because even reloading that chapter brought up the exact same bug. Now, by the time this video airs, I have a feeling most of these bugs will be addressed. I even reached out to Nelson to let him know about the endgame bug, and I just saw in an update this morning that has been fixed. I even tested it. It's fixed. But there are a handful of pesky bugs here and there that popped up to remind me that humans make imperfect things. And unfortunately, a couple of them forced me to reload entire chapters to just keep going. Some of them even obscured my line of sight so that I couldn't see. Bugs happen though, and they're going to happen to even the most polished of games. The question we have to ask ourselves is, do the bugs outweigh the impact of the game? No, they don't, not in the slightest. Again, these glitches were few and far between. It's just that the ones which did rear their ugly heads were unfortunately ones that couldn't be ignored. El Paso Elsewhere, as a game experience, is one that I am personally putting up on the shelf next to Silent Hill 2. It hits. It hurts. It will linger long after the fact, and the nostalgia that seeps into the memories of bad relationships is present everywhere. From a critical perspective, the game is tight, fires on all cylinders, and even a few progression blocking bugs isn't enough to detract from the overall experience of badassery and heartache. This is a game that is truly special, and is going on my short list of Game of the Year candidates. I'm gonna give El Paso Elsewhere a 9 out of 10. Spooky month always seems to have at least 1 or 2 surprises for us kids, and thank you, as always, for being a part of the festivities this time around. If you want to see these videos early, you can join my Patreon or become a channel member through YouTube, and that helps me work on my goal towards making this a full-time job for me. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Remember to sit up straight, roll your shoulders to work the kinks out, stay hydrated, kids, and I'll see you next time.
Lay those bodies down, boy, get your numbers up. I'm a ghoul, I'm a freak, I'm a fucking demon. Making ghosts not a sound beyond the screaming. Getting quiet cause they know I'm the final boss. I'm a legend cause I spoke with the lockbox. Targets thinning and I grin with every slay. Like the dog, I'ma get my fucking day. Cops around if they think they can make me stop. I'm immortal cause I rock with the lockbox. David Stone